In life, there are few things that are better in reality than in dreams. Watching a rocket launch is one of them. And that's why today, I invite you to relive as closely as possible one of the only events that can both warm your heart and chill your blood at the same time. 300,000 years after mastering fire, we built rockets. The Ariane 5 engines ignited, the world trembles, everything else around stops and stop. Actually, it doesn't really look like that. It's much more than what you see, because in reality, it's always much more impressive than it is behind a screen. And it's this overwhelming sense of power that you feel when the equivalent mass of a tenth of an Eiffel Tower, packed full of explosives and fuel, tears itself from the ground to head toward the stars that I'm going to try to help you experience. To do that, let's start with the introductions. The short guy in the foreground, that's me. 5 feet 9 inches tall, 150 pounds, I'm here for scale. And I'm going to spend my entire life on Earth. In the background, like a sleeping giant, that's Ariane 5. Height, 180 feet with a mass of 780 tons at liftoff. And in 2 days it will be in space. Well, not this one, which is just a full-scale model, but that one, VA257, which I was lucky enough to see launch last July. I was invited by 5's to record the latest episode of the podcast La Nouvelle Odyssée de l'Espace. If you haven't listened to it yet, go check it out. The link is in the description. We even got to get as close as possible to this legendary rocket, about 200 meters from the launch pad, 8.5 hours before it lifted off. And if you're wondering why we didn't get any closer, it's because at that moment, the rocket, sitting on a solid slab of metal and concrete, with 2 satellites hidden under its fairing at the top, was already partially fueled. On either side of the central core are boosters, the EAPs. They are 31 meters tall and 3 meters wide, weighing 38 tons when empty. Except that at this stage, each one is filled with 237 tons of a powder that takes the form of a viscous and highly explosive paste. As for the insides of the main stage, which is 30 meters tall and 5 meters wide, they will soon be filled with 200 tons of extremely chilled hydrogen and oxygen. In fact, a rocket like Ariane 5 is, in a way, one of the biggest controlled firecrackers on our planet, because it takes a lot of energy to go into space. To really understand this, consider that about 50% of the total mass of a commercial airliner is made up of payloads, such as passengers or luggage. Whereas here, the satellites encapsulated in the fairing represent just over 1% of the total mass of the rocket, which at liftoff consists, by weight, of 90% propellant. That is, substances that, alone or mixed with others, go boom. That's why, 5 hours before launch, as the main body starts to fill up, all personnel leave the area. Now let's take a big leap in time to 10 seconds before ignition, with the core stage filled to the brim with propellant and the engineers' bodies filled with adrenaline. Here we are, after hours of procedures and countless checks at the point of no return. At the base of the main stage, we are facing the one that ignites first and finds itself almost entirely at the heart of a blaze, the Vulcain engine. A marvel of engineering, a jewel that was designed and built to operate in hell while unleashing it. Because the Vulcain is capable of developing a power of 21,000 horsepower, which is about as much as 2 high-speed trains running at full speed, while it could fit entirely in the volume of a small van. When the Vulcain ignites, at T-2 seconds, that's when things get serious. Its turbopump, spinning at 33,000 revolutions per minute, will inject 200 liters of oxygen and 600 liters of hydrogen every second into a combustion chamber, where these elements will react to form a stream of burning gas that, highly pressurized, will be expelled from the nozzles at speeds of about 14,000 km/h. Keep in mind that inside the engine, everything has been meticulously designed to cope with both hellish and freezing conditions. Because here, the temperature ranges from 250 degrees on the pump side to plus 630 degrees at the exit point, just 20 cm farther. The Vulcain has ignited, and even though it's expelling from the main stage the equivalent of 5 bathtubs of propellant every second, the rocket still hasn't moved. And it's only at T+7 seconds that the 2 solid rocket boosters come into play and ignite. And that's when what can truly be called one of the most powerful and perhaps most impressive controlled explosions on our planet really begins. A continuous explosion, which nothing can stop anymore. Because while the Vulcain engine can be shut down in case of malfunction, once ignited, it's impossible to stop the operation of the side boosters. And when the 480 tons of viscous and metastable propellant they contain between them ignite, Ariane 5 takes off on a one-way journey. In front of such a spectacle, everyone holds their breath, almost forgetting to breathe. Some even have to squint to keep their eyes on the rocket. In reality, with this ignition, the images are pushed to their very limits. And inevitably, all those captured near the rocket have, in a way, lied to you a little. Because they are taken by cameras whose apertures have been stopped down considerably to reduce the effects of the bursting light. To be convinced of this, let's take a step back. Let's observe, from a viewing site located 15 kilometers from the launch pad, the first moments after the ignition of the two solid rocket boosters. Even at such a distance, the explosion of white light almost completely makes the rocket disappear in a ball of energy that it seems to have produced. Now, imagine what it would be like if you were much closer. And now Ariane 5 slowly begins to rise into the sky, like a huge ball of fire resembling a second little sun. It must be said that the power generated by this metal monster, filled with powder and flammable gases, is, once the two solid rocket boosters are ignited, on the same order of magnitude as all the French nuclear power plants running at full capacity. And this titanic outpouring of energy has to be controlled. In fact, the amount of energy released by Ariane 5 at liftoff is so great that a semi-buried concrete structure, up to 30 meters deep in some places, had to be built to withstand it, along with huge concrete tunnels to evacuate the jets of burning gas. In fact, even this structure alone is not enough. So, to contain all the power of Ariane 5, the launch platform must also be literally flooded under a deluge of water during the first 30 seconds after ignition. To calm this kind of fire, 30 cubic meters of water are poured every second onto a launch pad exposed to heat fluxes 20,000 times greater than those received from the sun at its zenith. If such a wall of water is poured, it's obviously to cool down a beast that spits out gases reaching around 3,000 degrees as they leave the engines, and thus prevent it from weakening and melting part of the structure. But also to dampen the roar, the sounds and the vibrations that Ariane 5 produces. Because in this furnace, the intensity of the acoustic waves can weaken the launch structure and even destroy much of the structure. It's hard to do justice to this end-of-the-world scream, which reaches a noise level of about 200 decibels. Except to specify that within 150 meters of its open flaming mouth, it's believed that the pressure waves generated must be deadly. Even from 5 kilometers away, they make the ground walls and spectators' hearts vibrate. And even at 15 kilometers away as the crow flies, the sound that reaches you, with a delay between the image and the sound of about 45 seconds, remains an impressive, heavy, crackling rumble in the background. As a tribute to it, I now suggest we let this sound speak for itself by listening without embellishment to the first minute of a launch. With an apocalyptic screech, the incandescent fireball continues its ascent. Protected inside the fairing by more than 1,000 foam blocks, which cover its walls to reduce vibrations as much as possible. Inside, the onboard satellites still have to withstand 140 decibels. During the 2 minutes following the ignition of the two huge controlled explosion boosters, the EAPs, like missiles attached on either side of the main body, will unleash considerable power. Each consuming nearly 2.5 tons of propellant per second, they alone will provide nearly 92% of the thrust needed for the rocket to tear its massive body away from Earth's gravity. Barely 2 minutes after ignition, at about 70-kilometer altitude, once they are spent and have given almost everything, the two EAPs are jettisoned. That small point you can see still lit in the middle is the rocket continuing its journey, and those drifting off to the sides are the EAPs, which then begin a long fall toward the Atlantic Ocean. It took Ariane 5 just about 130 seconds to reach a speed of 7,200 km/h, and in this process, the rocket lost more than 3/4 of its weight. For those on the ground, the rocket is now just a fleeting dot. The show is nearly over. All that's left to look at are the immense trails left in the wake of the rocket's passage. The plumes of smoke are so wide that they almost look like storm clouds. But Ariane's adventure continues. And as it moves forward, the rocket will continue to shed, one by one, the components of its imposing armor that have become useless. When the rocket reaches an altitude of 100 kilometers, it crosses the Kármán line and technically enters space. From now on, friction is practically reduced to nothing, and now Ariane 5 sheds another 2 tons by dropping its fairing. Barely. 3 minutes and 30 seconds have passed since H0, and the now bare rocket, shown here in computer-generated images, is now displaying a speed of Mach 7. And it's now powered only by the Vulcain engine, which will continue to accelerate for about another 5 minutes, enough time to bring the speed of the whole assembly up to around 24,000 km/h. Then, once it passes 200 kilometers in altitude, and while the distance from the launch point is already close to 1,600 kilometers, the Vulcain engine, along with the main stage, is also jettisoned. These 2 components will never reach the ocean. They will be completely burned up by friction as they re-enter the atmosphere. All that remains of Ariane 5 is the second stage, which ignites and takes over to begin the final propulsion phase, which lasts about 15 minutes here. When this last stage shuts down, the final ballistic phase begins, which can last from a few minutes to several hours or even days, depending on the target orbit. But all of this, of course, we can't see from the ground. When I was a kid, I used to see rockets taking off everywhere. Now that I'm a bit older, I saw one launch for real, but only for about 2 minutes and 30 seconds before it shrank to a tiny dot. A fleeting childhood dream. Ariane 5, which required, to become a reality on such a large scale, the work of generations of tens of thousands of adults. Today, space exploration remains one of the only fields where you can still find projects whose design can span several generations. Projects that, in my eyes, are the great works, the cathedrals of our time. So yes, I could have spent hours on every single component of Ariane 5 since everything here has been so carefully designed. From the types of materials used to the structures themselves, everything is made to withstand infernal conditions during their final moments of life. I could have talked about the work of titans, the feats of engineering, the logistics and the gigantic construction projects that are behind putting each satellite into orbit. But I preferred to focus on that big explosion, the dream of a child hidden inside an adult, inside a grown-up. Being able to send about 10 tons into space is an immense achievement, and it also allows us to bring to life dreams and projects among the most ambitious, sometimes carried by all of humanity. Those of the great space research missions, because besides telecommunications, geolocation, or weather satellites, which by the dozens have flown inside Ariane rocket fairings, it is from here, in Kourou, in French Guiana, that probes have been sent to Mercury, to the Rosetta Comet, or that iconic space telescopes have launched, such as Planck, or more recently, the James Webb. All these probes and telescopes, before they could provide us with magnificent images of the surface, of comets, planets, distant galaxies, and even the entire universe, went through there, encapsulated at the top of a rocket, in a way, sitting atop a carefully controlled explosion.